Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 24, and we are doing chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Words of Radiance. We have a Shallan chapter, one Kaladin chapter, and one Dalinar chapter. So we are very well balanced this week. Eliot, do you have 2 words to describe these 3 chapters?
I do. My 2 words for these chapters are spren politics.
Spren politics. Cool. Paul, do you have 2 words for this episode?
I do. Well, actually, I don't. I only have 1 word.
Okay.
It's actually one of my words for the last episode as well. And that word is shadows.
Shadows. We are still in shadows, according to Paul.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we have spren politics.
2 full episodes with shadows.
Let's discuss these. All right, Eliot, talk to me about spren politics.
So I picked spren politics because these words work individually and also together to help describe these chapters. We learn a lot about spren. I have a lot of questions about spren. It seems like there's a lot more to spren than I originally thought there were. Then later on in the Kaladin and Dalinar chapters, we definitely get some politics, some light eyes politics. But then we also learned that spren also have politics. So there's that. Spren politics.
There is that. Paul, why are we still in shadows?
So we're in shadows for several different reasons. We're in shadows partly because of these new shadowy spren that we are meeting. We are also in shadows partly because a few different things. So I said the kind of shadowy spren, which we see kind of notated as lies spren, kind of shady. Also, we see some more of the like bad intentions and shady character of Sadeas and his wife. It seems like there's a lot of shady intentions going on there, so I felt like shadows was still a good encompassing word for a lot of the themes we're seeing this week.
All right. Speaking of Sadeas' wife, we have 2 spell checks this week, and we can start with Sadeas' wife. Eliot, how would you like to say her name? This is going to be very interesting because I don't know if you're going to get all the letters correct, even though you have it in front of you.
The way my brain wants to pronounce this one cannot be remotely close. So I'm gonna try and make some logical jumps here. I don't have any hopes of even being close on this one, but Sadeas' wife, her name is Iele.
Correct. That is how they say it in the audiobook.
Yes.
What?
You are
Are
not
you serious?
Yeah, I'm very serious. They pronounce it Iele.
Wow.
Oh no.
Wow.
I know I'm gonna get this one so wrong. I have to say, I'm gonna be on such a bad streak of spelling these. I know I'm so off, and I haven't even begun.
Go for it. You can do it.
Impressed. At least I think I am, because I don't know at all how this one's spelled. So I went very short. And
Okay.
it helps a little bit thinking that Eliot didn't think it was going to be ELA. So I have EILE, 4 letters. It's probably way off, but I had no other idea how to.
Give you how my brain wants to pronounce this when I read it the first time. Eli is how I want to say it.
So it's like lay with like a EIA or whatever at the end, like that. Or
so
yeah,
at least you included an L, but I think everything else is wrong.
only right letter. I knew this one was going to be bad. Both of the spell checks this week are just I heard him, and I was like, all right, this is the end of my
Here goes.
my spell check career. This is ending my spell check career for sure.
So here's how you spell ELA. It is a perfect palindrome. It is IALAI. ELA.
Complete lucky guess on
Okay.
my half.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I never would have gotten that.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm very impressed with Elliot though. That was very impressive. That
I'm pretty shocked with Elliot right now.
perfect palindrome. It's interesting.
And this other one's not going to be much easier.
The other one is the one I was more afraid of.
All right, so this one is there's very little context for this name, but the description we are given is it has a spy, and once this thing touches a spren, the spren doesn't act right.
And this is in the Dalinar vision, right?
Correct. This is in Dalinar's vision. He thinks he's in the Pure Lake. They're chasing a spren, and this thing has touched it, is what they say. Elliot, how would you like to say this name?
I'm shooting in the dark again. I got pretty lucky last time, so who knows? I'm gonna go with Siaanat. Siaanat. I can't even say it. Siaanat.
All right,
Not quite as the last one.
you nailed ELA, so this one has to be a little bit of a strike.
Yeah.
Paul, how do they say it? If you remember, I can help you. If you,
Yes, I believe it was Ja'anat.
it is
Okay.
Ja'anat, and good luck, Paul, because there are silent letters here.
Oh no. See, my biggest question on this was so I assumed it was a hyphenated word, but my biggest question is how do you make the ja sound at the beginning? My initial thought was just a J, but every time we've seen a J, it's a ya, like Yasna and stuff. So it had to be different. So I went with, and already hearing Elliot's pronunciation, I know this is not going to be right. Um, but I went initially with DJA hyphen ANAT.
That's a really good guess, actually.
You're only one letter off. So
Is it like an S at the
it
beginning?
is an S. So here's the only reason why you might have known that is because Zeth's name
Mhm.
gives it the zing at the beginning, I guess you'd say. So it's Ja Anat is how you say it. It's how you spell it.
I'm impressed you knew it was hyphenated right off the bat. That was pretty good.
That was just going off past times where I got that very wrong. And finding out that the words were hyphenated. So that was learning by mistake is where we're at.
Nice.
Chapter 3 with a Shalon chapter. Any first impressions of this chapter? We are introduced to, well, sort of. We're sort of introduced to one, if not two, new characters. Anyone want to pick this up?
Yes. So if by new characters you mean our cool little, I don't know if he's cool yet or not. He's definitely interesting. our little sprint buddy with Shalon, Pattern. I believe.
Pattern is his name.
Yes. Very, very interesting and very kind of cryptic compared to like Syl, for example.
Okay.
Kind of take away the naiveness and you add just straight unknowingness. With Pattern, you don't really know what's going on. But I'm super as soon as I listened to this chapter, I was so excited and really interested because the biggest thing I've wondered was, do our other notable characters have a sprint of their own, or will they get a sprint of their own, or anything like that? Whenever we're kind of coupled with the whole Knights Radiant thing and seeing if they have it, this kind of plays into that a bit, which I'm super excited about. Makes me even more curious now and kind of leads into the thought that maybe Zeth has his own sprint.
He's
maybe
gotta.
his own skill. Yeah, he has to, for
He's
sure.
gotta.
No doubt in my mind at this point. But yeah, so we meet Pattern, and he's definitely a bizarre kiddo. Um, I don't really know what to make of him, but Shalon is starting to learn a lot about this kind of quickly, and it was super fascinating. And I'm super excited now that we know Shalon has her own spren. One other thing I kind of want to mention. I don't think this is jumping too far ahead, but something to think about, and I want to know your thoughts. So we've seen that Shalon and Yasna have similarities, and we're kind of getting into that. But I think it's also mentioned, I believe, in this chapter that they have a strong similarity, but also a strong difference. And I don't know if we know what that is or what that may be, or if that has anything to do with the spren here that they have. I really don't know. But yeah, this plays into my thought about each of our Knights Radiant esque characters having their own spren. So I'm super happy.
Elliot, I'll let you chime in here in a second, but I just wanted to say that that's probably the best description of pattern I've ever heard from someone say. A bizarre kiddo. I really enjoyed that description because
Thank you.
he is a very bizarre kiddo. I will agree with that.
He is, yeah.
So I want to make a comparison for you guys as we got to meet this new spren pattern and his strange ways. I think Shalon herself describes him as imbecilic. I couldn't help but think of comparing Shalon and pattern to Elsa and Olaf from Frozen, and how Shalon is discovering her powers. She's figuring out what's going on. She almost accidentally creates this spren that she does with her drawing. Compare that to Elsa, who's discovering her powers, accidentally creates this rather goofy little immature snowman. Yeah, pattern is now Olaf in my mind.
All right,
That is actually incredible.
that's pretty good. All right, yeah, well, we can run with that. That pattern is Olaf.
Pattern is Olaf.
Just less
and
whimsical, less musical Olaf.
right. Although who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he'll break out in a song later.
Yeah, I hope so.
But on a more serious note, I had some interesting thoughts on kind of how Shalon interacts with her spren here, of how, like, when she's looking directly at him on the wall, he disappears initially, and how she can't like look directly at him if she wants to keep seeing him. And she's able to snap the memory of him and then draw him, and then by drawing him, he becomes real, or he becomes physical in the room. And I thought back again to our old ardent couple that we talked about last episode a couple times, how they were looking at the flame spren, and when they measured the flame spren, that kind of locked in that one attribute on that spren. Did Shalon just do something similar with this spren, that she, by drawing him, did she kind of bring him into the physical realm, maybe out of Shadesmar and into the physical realm? I'm not really sure, but some interesting interactions there.
I've never wanted to spoil something more on this podcast than right now. I will be completely honest.
Wow,
that's
big.
There is a very clear answer here, but I can't tell you.
Oh man,
intriguing.
I really like how Shadesmar works. That how Brandon Sanderson has established it, but you have to figure it out on your own. So I can't tell you.
Of course.
I will say, so y'all have been bringing up that older couple from the interlude chapter, I believe, a few times, and I guess I'm a little surprised because I think that was easily the most forgettable interlude chapter for me. Maybe because it wasn't super exciting or notable. It's kind of just them bickering almost and learning about the flame spren. But yeah, I guess it is a little glimpse into these other realms and kind of the first notice of that we have. I don't know if it's jumping too far ahead, but with Eliot's word of spren politics, I believe that kind of comes into play here, and I'm kind of curious to hear what Elliot has to say about that, because I also have some thoughts about that, and I'm really glad that you chose those as your words there.
So I do have thoughts on Spren politics and kind of the bit that we learn. I think again from Yasna in this chapter. But before we do that, I think we need to talk a little bit about what like this Spren is. We get told that he's a cryptic, that these symbol heads that Shallan has been interacting with are known as the cryptics, which I think is it said that that's a name that they give themselves, and that their common name or their spread name would be lie spread. And Paul, you mentioned this earlier. I thought that was interesting because that's the exact opposite of what I thought they were going to be. I thought they were going to be truth spread because of the truth that Shallan has to share with them in order to enter Shadesmar. Turns out they're the opposite. They're lie spread. So that has me questioning some things that I maybe assumed before about Shallan and her interactions with these guys. But interesting there. I makes sense, I guess, why they're congregating around Shallan if they're lie spread and she's here telling this massive lie about her life. So I guess maybe that makes sense. But then we get into the politics. We learned that cryptics are kind of like the light eyes of Shadesmar. They're kind of they rule, at least I think it said at least one city in Shadesmar. And then we also learned that they have some kind of running conflict with the honors. That was kind of what I was referencing with the Spren politics of my mind is really kind of getting opened at this point to Spren are way more than I thought. I thought Spren were just kind of these, aspects of nature that are unique to this world and this Roshar of it's, in this world there's pain, but there's also pain Spren, which is just kind of a visualization of that phenomenon, or there's nature or life Spren or whatever else there is. Now we're learning they have cities, they have conflicts with each other, they have all kinds of stuff that I wasn't even thinking was going to be in the realm of possibility. So this is rather intriguing about how the just Spren interactions with each other and then also with humans works. A lot of questions now.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting, and it kind of got my mind racing. So I immediately thought back to when Selfrena sees Hoyd and says, "I don't like that guy."
Yes.
And I think that has to be part of with the Spren politics as well. Um, so as we've learned more about Shadesmar, we know it's probably pretty expansive. It's kind of as there's the entire physical world, there's probably a very full, enormous cognitive world. And I bet, that we're learning that they have their own conflicts and, issues there as well. So I bet Hoyd has his own Spren too. And I would go so far to say that it's probably a you know one that's not very light. Maybe it's kind of a big antagonist. Maybe he's like, I don't remember. There's like the Dustbringers, which seem to be like the
Mhm.
kind of ominous antagonist, almost like characters. And I bet it's a Spren that maybe even Pattern wouldn't like. Maybe it's a real distasteful Spren. Um,
I
so I don't
really
know.
like that idea. I really like that idea about Hoyd. I think that makes a lot of sense. We're learning that maybe honor spread, which we know Syl is, have some problems with maybe some of the less honorable Spren out there. Is Hoyd tied into that somehow? Oh, I think maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. And I think whenever Shallan ends up in the Shattered Plains as well, I bet we'll see maybe how Syl reacts to Shallan. Maybe she'll have a similar reaction.
Yes.
I don't like her because maybe she isn't aware of the Spren, but kind of gets that feeling, and has that also. I don't know if this is like, I don't know what to make of this entirely. or if I should even be looking into this, but in the back of the Way of Kings, it has a note of Shadesmore, or like
In the Arcanum?
kind of, yeah, kind of. Well, I was talking about like the map. Is that okay to?
Oh, yeah. That's fine.
Yeah. So it has like a map of Shadesmore, and there's 9 places on there, and one of which is the Nexus of Truth. And my guess is that maybe that's where these Lie Spren are from, or would Elliot guess would be Truth Spren? I mean, there's kind of different like areas, and there's 9 different ones, which I thought was interesting also because aren't there 10 Orders of the Knights Radiant?
There are.
I wonder if that has something to do with the Herald who was left behind, I guess, right? Like, so there are like 9 swords, or I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe there's like 9 locations on this map in Shadesmore. I don't fully understand what they are, but there are 9 of them, and I think that would correspond to the 9 heralds that we've kind of learned about.
Okay.
And so yeah, I think there's definitely got to be something with that. That like each of the 9 places, some may like each other, some may not like each other, but I bet that this is maybe the spren from the Nexus of Truth. And I bet there's ones where Scylla's from, and I bet there's some big correlation there I don't fully understand yet. But I thought that was super interesting, even though I don't fully understand it. I bet there has to be something significant there.
Look at you with the detective work there, Paul. That is all new information to me. I hadn't even thought about that.
For sure. I'll definitely keep that in mind as we learn more about pattern, because it's probably my biggest the biggest thing I'm focusing on right now is pattern and seeing what he does. Especially once we, I wonder if pattern and Syl can see each other, because I feel like that would be a really interesting interaction, because they both are really quirky in their own way.
I
We
wonder the
have
same thing. Are we going to get, like a Syl
dialogue.
versus pattern moment? Are they
Yeah.
gonna, like
Yeah.
like 2 dogs on a walk, go in the opposite direction, like have to stop and like, who are you? Kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. I would love to see that. And they speak, I don't know. I bet they have their own like language or something, and they start talking to each other in Spren talk, and then we're really confused and wonder what they talk about. We have to guess, but who knows? Either way, I'm super excited. That's probably my biggest thing I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping soon they're in the Shattered Plains and we get to see something like that.
Something I wanted to highlight for you guys in this chapter is back when we met Syl. Syl knew her own name. Didn't know why she knew her own name, but she did have a name and she knew it. Pattern hasn't said a word yet, and Shallan named Pattern. So, assuming that is his actual name and he doesn't have another one that we'll call him later, do you guys think there's any weird connection there that Shallan gave him a name and Syl already knew her name?
It took Syl a little bit of time to remember her name. I guess after reading this chapter, my thought was just that pattern is at the very beginning of this process of when Syl first started. She was just, as far as we knew, a Windspren, and she knew who Kaladin was, and that was about it. And then she's developed and she's come a really long way since then. There's even still moments in these chapters where she's starting, things are kind of still coming back to her as she goes. And so I was just kind of assuming that pattern starting from a little bit further back than Syl is, where he doesn't even know how to talk yet, and maybe given enough time he'll get to that point and he would remember what his name was or whatnot. But maybe I'm going down the wrong path with that.
One thing I just thought of that I think might become something important. So we saw a lot of development with Kaladin and Silfrena, and most of that was kind of Syl being like the positive note in Kaladin's story. where a lot of times he doesn't see anything positive going on. And from what we know about Shalon, she has like different struggles, different trials, and I think these sprints seem to be specific to each character, or at least they're different for the different characters. Hopefully, there will be more. But I think Pattern will turn out to be kind of providing this different aspect specific to Shalon, where Kaladin kind of needed this positivity almost or reinforcement in a way. And maybe Shalon needs, I can't put my finger on what specifically it would be, but maybe knowledge or creation since she's believe possible of like soul casting and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's going to be something that will help kind of character, if that makes sense, in kind of a way that Shalon helps Kaladin.
So helps Kaladin.
Mhm.
Yeah. What if now you're getting me wondering, what if Pattern becomes a negative influence on Shalon? What if it's so different such there still is kind of that positive influence in Kaladin? Maybe Pattern is more of like a mischievous or negative influence on Shalon. That would be interesting.
Could be. That would definitely be.
Or maybe he's just her singing snowman.
Well,
Maybe
yeah, yes, could be as well.
We also quite briefly, saw Jasna's Spren. And so Jasna was about to open Shalon's door, and she was cupping her other hand. And does it tell us his name?
Ivory.
Okay, I didn't want to spoil it if it didn't.
Yeah, I did.
For sure.
Ivory is standing in Jasna's hand, and then quickly vanishes when he sees Shalon. So, do you guys have any first impressions of this guy?
Yes. So I don't remember for sure. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but from what we know, are there notable differences between Pattern and Ivory, or I don't know if we know enough there. My impression was that they're similar, like they seem like similar type of Spren, but not like the same. Do y'all remember on that?
So,
Um,
Ivory is described as a dark, like a very dark skinned little person, like similar to what Sylphrena looks like. And Pattern is described as a pattern. He has no like actual human-ish body that it's noticeable.
Gotcha. Okay.
I also drew parallels between Ivory's description and kind of like the shadow we saw in the prologue of kind of like this inky blackness.
Yeah.
So I was kind of leaning thinking that
Yeah,
direction.
I definitely envisioned it as literally that same
Yeah.
character from the prologue, just mini in the palm of her hand. So my thought on this is, from what we know about the Knights Radiant, some of the different orders have things in common. Um, and we know Shalon and Yasna have, I guess, one aspect of their order, if we can go so far as to say that
Mm-hmm.
right now, in common. And so I think these Spren are similar but different. Like they have something in common, and that's what Shalon and Yasna have in common. But each will do something different, and that's kind of where they differ. So Pattern is very different from Ivory, but they kind of have this middle ground, and it's the middle ground of Shalon and Yasna. But they are like different Spren, and will ultimately do some different things. But they're probably pretty close to each other, pretty similar.
Sure.
I don't know what the difference is yet. That's what I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I think Yasna mentions this in this chapter of she says that they are of different orders, but that they share this surge or whatever it is, that this soul casting ability, which I thought they were going to be of the same order because they had this shared soul casting ability, and Yasna's now saying that they clearly aren't. So wondering what orders they are. I have to
Mhm.
figure that out.
Yeah, Yasna assumed the same thing, that they were going to be in the same order, and that's why the Spren led Shallan to Yasna, but that's not the case.
This is another thing that makes me excited. So I was really, really happy to find out that they're not the same, because I was asked before if Zeth and Kaladin were both Windrunners. And I would guess now, with this information, that Zeth and Kaladin have this surge binding and these lashings in common, but they each have things that are different. So I think they're going to be different orders, but both like kind of share those lashings, I guess. And I think that's kind of how it is with Shallan and Yasna. They can both soulcast, but they have different things that we don't fully know yet. Meaning they're in different orders, but they share that similar aspect.
Any closing thoughts on chapter 3 before we push on?
That's all I had. I'm super excited to learn more about these Spren, though.
I think that was it for 3.
Yasna has seen Shallan with her safe hand uncovered. Just wanted to mention that.
Oh, no.
How scandalous.
Scandalous.
Oh no.
Oh my.
Oh my goodness.
Alrighty. Now, chapter 4. We have our first Dalinar chapter of Words of Radiance, and we jump right in to a vision. We don't even get any setup. Dalinar's just in a vision. And any thoughts on this vision before I talk a little bit?
I felt like there was, like some of the other visions that we've seen with Dalinar, just not enough information here for us to put together anything concrete. There's a few little tidbits that we get here and there. We see a little more information about Radiance and the men around them that they're using. We see a Thunderclast, which is interesting. We last saw those mentioned all the way back in the prologue of Way of Kings. So a little more information there, but just, man, not enough to really like draw any concrete thoughts out of this. At least that's where I was kind of left.
He assumes he's in the Pure Lake based on the water that he's running through, but he sees a huge...
We've been there.
We have been there. Shout out to Ishik.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a huge castle, and Dalinar assumes that it doesn't exist anymore, because if it did, it would be famous. So there's this huge black castle just in the middle of this huge lake. So, any predictions, any guesses on if this castle still exists or not?
I'm gonna say it doesn't, because so this is still at the Pure Lake, right? So what the whole imagery I get from Ishik's interlude is that this is like a really, like, no one lives there kind of thing, like very rural area. So I would just say, based off of that this castle is not there anymore.
I'm thinking the same thing. I think Vonnie even mentions something about it when Dalinar comes out of the vision, about how there's myths about giant structures in the Pure Lake or something like that. So that seems to maybe add some evidence to this existed a very long time ago. It doesn't now. Maybe it sunk beneath the Pure Lake, or was crushed, underclassed, or who knows what, but probably not there would be my guess.
I was gonna say maybe the Thunderclast that gets summoned just kills the whole fortress right there.
Wrecks the whole thing. Yeah.
So kind of I'll come back to the vision a little bit, but there's something I wanted to point out here with the vision. I have something for you guys to look at in the Discord. So this picture that we'll put on screen for you guys is a picture of old Roshar. It's one of the ancient maps of Old Roshar, and you'll notice that the area that includes the Pure Lake on this lake is called Selatales. And when Dalinar comes out of the vision, Navani tells him that he changed languages. At first, he was speaking Salay, and then he changed to the Dawn chant, back to what they've been trying to decode with these visions. And Old Pure Lake is in Selatales, where they speak an old form of Salay. So, no matter who... And then, at the end of the vision, he changes back to the Dawn chant of what he's talked before to talk to the Almighty. So, Dalinar can talk to anybody in these visions, no matter what language they are speaking. He speaks Salay to them, and they understand him, he can understand them. And then he switches to the Dawn chant, which is what the Almighty is apparently speaking. And he can just switch back and forth, and he doesn't even know he's doing it. Any thoughts?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that he's actually speaking these languages in the visions. He just hears it as words he understands, Alethi or whatever language he's speaking. So he hears it all in words that he understands. What he's at is their languages. I hadn't thought about that.
This older style map is in your version of the Way of Kings, isn't it, Elliot?
I don't think so.
It's in mine, and I wanted to note it as well. So, since I just mentioned, so at the front of my book, it shows this map, the current map that we're looking at there, and on the back, it shows the corresponding. It's really fuzzy on this. I apologize for Shadesmore. And I noted, first thing I did since I just talked about it, is that there are 10 regions on here, and I would guess that that's going to correspond to the Heralds and the Knights Radiant,
Mm-hmm.
It's just got to.
That would make sense.
Say that's not a coincidence, but I'm really curious now, because I brought up the 9 sections in Shadesmore, what the difference is. So that's not really related to what we're talking about right now, but I just had to put a pin in that thought.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that Dalinar can speak multiple languages without him actually knowing them.
Magic.
No big deal, very casual.
So Dalinar has surmised or assumed that the visions are telling him the truth, but the visions have told him that the Almighty is dead. So that brings up 2 questions of how is he seeing these visions if the Almighty is dead? Second one is, why is Dalinar still talking back to him? He still has tries to have conversation. He tells the Almighty that I will reform the Knights Radiant, like he tells him to, but he knows he's dead, or at least that he can't hear him, as he established at the end of Way of Kings. So what is he doing?
I think it's like us shouting advice to our favorite. They can't hear you, but we shout it anyway. Look out, they're coming, kind of thing.
Right.
I think Dalinar knows full well that the Almighty can't hear him, but he can't help himself, ask questions kind of almost rhetorically or knowing he's not getting an answer. But that was kind of how I took it, of he's just trying to process what's going on, and he's asking questions knowing that hopefully realizing now he doesn't have that two-way conversation thought he had in the last book. But the other question you ask is the one of most interest to me, is if the Almighty is dead, how is he sending messages to Dalinar? Are these all like tapes that were recorded before his death and they're just being like mailed to Dalinar one by one kind of thing? Or
sent via your local high storm?
I sure, right? Whatever. Or is it more complicated than that? Or does the death of a god mean something a little bit different than the death of a human? Is it, the Almighty is dead, but does that maybe mean that not necessarily mean that he ceases to exist and more of he is dethroned, or I don't know quite how to phrase it, but maybe it's not quite the banished to oblivion that maybe death might mean for a being of that sort, and he's still able to somehow be sending these messages to Dalinar. But Dalinar wonders about this question, and I wonder about it a lot too.
It would there must be more to it than just these are like pre-recorded and sent to him, because we have seen with like the prelude to the Stormlight Archive, the at least with the heralds, kind of like it mentions that they die and come back. So
Yeah,
I would take it that that's at least a possibility.
that's a great
And
point, actually.
we'll see what's going on there. So I'm under the impression that the god in this scenario is not dead, like not just gone, but maybe in another realm. Maybe he's in the spiritual realm instead of the
Hey,
cognate. I don't know. We'll see. Um, but yeah, that's what I would think about that.
After the vision, Navani and Dalinar kind of talk back and forth. Navani leaves, and Dalinar passes out after the high storm. The high storm's already done. Dalinar passes out, comes to some time later. We don't really know the time span. It's pretty short. It's still the same day, that type of thing. And there are words, glyphs, written on the wall. Any thoughts on the glyphs written on the wall?
valuable information, and Dalinar thinks so too. Of we get a schedule because the glyphs on the wall say 62 days, death follows. And we know that something big is coming. We've heard Odium comes, we've heard the Everstorm is coming, we've heard the last desolation is coming. We don't know if all those are the same thing or if they're different things, but something big is coming. Now we have a number to put on it, 62 days. And maybe we're drawing some incorrect conclusions like Dalinar did before, perhaps with some of this information, but it seems pretty obvious that 62 days is referring to one of those big events, perhaps a cataclysmic event. And now we know what we're looking for. It's 62 days away.
Any thought?
I
Any thoughts on who wrote it?
Yes, I I had to scratch my head at first about how did this work? They had guards standing outside the door. Calvin's pretty confused. How do they get past my men? How do they get past me to get in there right on the wall? But then it hit me. This is probably obvious for folks that have read this a lot. It had to have been Dalinar that wrote that. I bet he sleepwalked, if you will, or kind of vision style was embodied by whoever's sending this message, and he, while he was sleeping, stood up, scratched that on the wall, and then went back to bed. And when he woke up, there it is. That's my guess.
What about Zeth?
Possible. If there's any able to get it in there and undetected and out, Zeth would be the one. Isn't Wouldn't he just kill him though? I mean, that's his job, right? To assassinate Dalinar. Wouldn't If he had gotten in there while Dalinar was sleeping, wouldn't he have just finished the job right there? I doubt it, Seth.
Well, with it potentially being Zeth, I don't think it is. But if it was, I mean, if that's what he was ordered to do at that time, I mean, that's what he would have done, is gone in there and done that and left, and maybe come back to kill him whenever he's supposed to. But um, we don't know that for sure. I actually didn't think about Dalinar just sleepwalking. It seems kind of the most logical. I didn't really think too much about what it was. I assumed it was some weird collision almost between the visions and reality, where part of the vision, or I guess a semblance of something important from the vision, kind of appeared in fruition in Dalinar's real life magically. I didn't really have a good connection on how that happened, uh, but I just kind of assumed it was tied to the whole these mystical visions, um, kind of haunting him or affecting him.
Sure.
Another bit of information I take away from this, actually, this 62 days death follows. I think back to the epilogue of Way of Kings, where we saw the herald Talonel Elin show up at the gates of Kholinar, and I wondered at the time where that fit in the time scale that we're at. Was that happening concurrent to the events that are happening at the Shattered Plains? Is this in the past? Is it in the future? We know as Hoyd was there. I wonder if what we saw there was actually in the future from where we were at there. I wonder if that happens concurrent with this 62 days event, because when Talonel Elin shows up, he says the desolation is here, or something like that. I'm not remembering exactly off the top of my head, but I wonder if that's the event of it's here, like it's actually arrived here. So my guess now is that was at the end of this 62-day time bomb that just started.
Bold prediction.
I do have one other bold prediction about this before we move on to the Kaladin chapter.
Sure.
So this just kind of hit me while we were talking about the vision. So in this vision that Dalinar has, they're trying to catch a spren, and he even says, like, how do you catch a spren? Like, it doesn't seem like something that's possible. And it just kind of slipped into my mind because we're at the Pure Lake, and the only other time we've seen that is with the Ishik chapter. And Ishik was sent to find Hoyd. And so now I'm wondering, since I kind of have this notion that each of our notable characters have their own spren, I wonder if whatever this spren is in this story is the same spren that maybe Hoyd has. And maybe that's kind of the connection to the Pure Lake and finding Hoyd. That's kind of a reach. But there's probably lots of reaches that can be made with these books. So I'm just gonna make that reach and say that this spren that was animating the Thunderclast, it seems like, is Hoyd's spren or close to it. Since that kind of seems to be a connection there. So that's a Hail Mary prediction, but I could definitely see it happening, and I kind of hope that's the case. I think that'd be kind of wild. So as you can tell, I'm totally in on this whole each character has their own unique little spren, and yeah, I'm super excited about that. So
I mean, while you're making predictions, might as well just throw one out there, see if you're completely right.
Exactly. If I am right about that, that's a pretty cool one to be right about, I think. So
I like it.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on chapter 4?
None here.
All right. Chapter 5. We have Kaladin, who sits in on a meeting between Dalinar, Adolin, King Elhokar, Navani, and Dalinar's general, I don't remember his name, is there as well. And Dalinar specifically tells him to guard on the inside of the door so that he can attend the meeting. And I just wanted to highlight how much trust Dalinar is giving him here. Like, the people attending this meeting are some of the highest influencing people in all of Roshar. And Dalinar is just like, yeah, sit in, please. And I'd like to hear some of your thoughts. So that's pretty cool.
Adolin notes that as well, and not with pleasure.
Yeah. I like the interaction between Adolin and Dalinar, where Adolin's kind of like whispering under his breath of like, can we really trust him? Like, I don't know if he should be here. And Dalinar's just like kind of talks over him in a normal voice so that Kaladin can hear. He's like, well, we have to trust some people, so go sit down, Adolin. And Kaladin's just like, oh yeah, I'm here.
I thought Dalinar's comment too was good, where he said, "If there's anyone in this camp, I'm 100% sure is not working for Sadius. It's this one."
It's that
It's
guy.
like-
Yeah.
Yep, that's true.
Any thoughts on this meeting of Dalinar's plan A and plan B to dethrone the other high princes of shards and what's the other part of the plan? I don't remember.
It's
Drawing a
about like how they're allocating the gem hearts and stuff, right? And kind of taking over all of that, if I remember correctly. So it basically seems like Dalinar's just throwing a wrench into the whole
Oh, I remember.
current system they have and everything. And so a lot of people aren't going to be super thrilled because it messes with how they do things. But
His plan B that he talks about that I was trying to think of is he wants to reform the Knights Radiant, and he tells that to the whole room, and literally everybody thinks he's insane.
Which I think it's Adolin has a really good point on that, actually. Understand the importance of what Dalinar is trying to do with reforming the Knights Radiant. We know the vision that Dalinar has for that. We know what the Knights Radiant were and could be. But everyone else who's been taught by the Vorin Church, if you will, they've been taught that the Knights Radiant betrayed mankind, or worse, were corrupt and ruled it as dictators. And so he makes a great point, Adolin does, of saying, Dad, if you come out and say, I'm reforming the Knights Radiant, no one is going to think that's a good idea. Everyone's going to think that's a terrible. They were terrible people. Why would you do that? So he's faced with a rather difficult challenge here of, in order to do this, he almost first has to clear the Knights Radiant's name first to get people to understand, no, I'm not trying to create that. I'm trying to create this group of honorable beings who defended and built up the world and were a force for great good in the world. He almost has to change the conception, or that's not the word I'm looking for, perception. There we go. Change the perception and then institute the idea first, which both of those don't sound easy.
Just undo foreign education real quick. And
Like thousands of years
Yep.
of teaching. Good luck.
casual.
Kaladin,
I
go ahead.
was just gonna say I wrote down the plan in quotes in my notes because I was trying to follow their logic, and I basically was following it as deprive the high princes of their shard blades, get people angry so that they think about why they're really here, and try not to get assassinated. That was basically the plan.
That is the plan.
Yeah.
All right.
Good plan.
Right.
Try not to get assassinated is kind of important, and that's why Kaladin's there.
And it's hilariously almost like the afterthought of the meeting. They're planning it out, and they're like, "Oh yeah, and by the way, everyone's going to try and assassinate us. Not just us, but our families and everyone. So hey, Kaladin over there, watch out for that. That's your job now."
During the meeting, Kaladin notices a dynamic to the room, that everybody is kind of facing Dalinar to lead the meeting and not Elokar. Elokar is the king of Alethkar, and all of the high princes swear to him, including Dalinar. And even Elokar is treating Dalinar in this senior authority figure. Any thoughts here?
I think this is kind of similar to Yasna, and where not that you fake power, but power isn't always something that a title can give you. A title does give you power. Like obviously, even Dalinar would, I guess kneel before the king, right? But just because he's the king does not make him the wisest of the group or the most knowledgeable. and I think they understand who Dalinar is and why he's doing what he's doing and things like that. And I think that is what's giving him this power and why everyone has the respect for him. And I think that's definitely why everyone's looking to him in this time instead of Elokar.
I totally agree with that. And I think Dalinar has to be a little bit careful here because he is stepping a bit beyond his authority, I think, in this. He's pretty much running the show now. And that's not necessarily his job. I mean, yes, he's High Prince of War. He's been appointed as the one in charge of this whole endeavor, if you will. But if he really steps up and starts to act as the king, that's a little dangerous in my mind just because we're fine with it because we know Dalinar's intentions are good. We know that he's being honorable and trying to improve everyone there. But if this was anyone else, we would not be okay with this. If this was anyone else, not even like Sadius or someone we know is evil, this was anyone we didn't trust, we would probably immediately point this out as, whoa, hey, this is not okay. He's not the king. Why does he get to say this? And so by knowing Dalinar's motive, we're okay with this, but not knowing that, we probably wouldn't be. So I hope Dalinar doesn't regret maybe overstepping his position a little bit here.
It's even to the point that Taravangian, way off in Carbranth, knows who the real threat is.
Yep.
He did not send Szeth to kill Elokar, who is the king of Alethkar, like Gavilar was. He sends him to kill Dalinar Kholin.
Yep. And maybe this is fine, and maybe this is a good thing, and maybe this will be the change that Alethkar needs. I mean, clearly Elokar is not going to do it. Elokar is not going to be willing to jump in and make wholesale change to their culture and what they've been doing for the last 6 years or whatever it is, and beyond that, it sounds like as well. So maybe this will be the change that Alethkar needs. Maybe Dalinar is the small stone that starts the avalanche here, but hopefully he's not overstepping his bounds or his abilities in doing so.
He seems like the most respected and probably the most hated person in Alethkar right now because he definitely is throwing a wrench into everyone's daily lives
For sure.
with all the changes he's making, and it's definitely not going to make him loved by the people, especially the other light eyes.
Let's look at Kaladin for a little bit in this chapter. After all, it is his chapter. Kaladin has this enormous chip on his shoulder from Light Eyes in the past, and it's already coming into his relationship with Dalinar. That he doesn't want to call him Bright Lord. He will if Dalinar tells him to, but Kaladin views the phrase Bright Lord as an insult. That he would rather call him Sir, which would be like what you call your squad leader in a Dark Eyes army. And if he has to call him Bright Lord, he's going to be like, well, that means you're going to betray me someday, so I'd rather call you Sir. And that there's a nice dynamic there that Kaladin is certainly bringing baggage into this this High Prince bodyguard relationship that he has with Dalinar.
I thought that was a cool little section for their relationship there, of how in Kaladin's mind, Sir is much more meaningful of a title for him to give Dalinar. Bright Lord is, but Dalinar doesn't see it that way. Dalinar's, I'm a Bright Lord. You need to address me as so. And Kaladin tries to explain, oh yeah, in my mind, that's a terrible thing to be. So I'm going to call you Sir. Trust me, it means more. And that's kind of cool knowing Kaladin's backstory. Like we know why that's more meaningful for him, but that's a little disrespectful from
Right.
Kaladin really to take that line in front of Dalinar and in his relationship there. So just like Dalinar needs to be careful about not overstepping his bounds, I think Kaladin needs to be a little careful too about not overstepping his place either.
And in the same category, you can put Moash. So there's a small encounter between Kaladin, Moash, and this other bodyguard guy who Kaladin walks up, and there's a light eyes bodyguard who starts he instantly starts resenting them of, oh, how did you get this position? How did you hold a whole bridge by yourself? He doesn't believe him that he could do that. And Moash instantly jumps in. It's like, well, you want us to show you? Like, he's trying to start a fight, and they're both bodyguards. And Kaladin says, dude, you're in the army now. You need to, hold back a little bit. And Moash says, oh, oops.
I actually really loved that segment. Might have been my favorite in this chapter, just because Kaladin gives Moash actually a really good lesson there, where he turns to Moash and tells him, hey, back down, man. And then later kind of explains, you don't have to back your enemies or your oppressors. Moash is looking at this as a light eyes, the person who's caused him all this pain in his life. And Kaladin's saying, you don't have to give in to him. A better way is to be better than him. Don't bow to him. Don't give in. Be better. Show them that you can be better than they are. That's a good life lesson right there.
Yeah, show them that we'll do their job better than they will, and we deserve to be here. And Moash is like, oh yeah, you're right. I'll do that. Any closing thoughts on this politics meeting chapter?
Nothing major. I'm really excited in the future. Like I said, as I believe our storylines will start to merge further. I feel like we've had, like I said before in the previous episode, also it feels like the Kaladin chapters are becoming a little more world building, not to the same extent as early Shalon, but I feel like Shalon's kind of getting all the fresh, new, exciting stuff, and I'm really hoping for a little more action in the future Kaladin chapters. But it was super great. I loved all of these. Like I could not stop listening. With all the chapters we've gone through lately in Words of Radiance, so I cannot wait to see where we can go from here.
It's actually really clever, Brandon Sanderson's part, in that we haven't seen really like more Shalon chapters than the other chapters we've seen. So you can't really point to that to say that this is Shalon's book. But already we're only 5 chapters in, and it's the Shalon chapters that we're looking forward to. Like Shalon's story is already the one that we're most gripped by, and so that clearly shows you that we're embarking on Shalon's book and story here. So some clever writing to have written it that way, and that it's not just that that's the bulk of the story. That's the one that has us the most intrigued right now. I have one other closing thought for this chapter, and that's a little tidbit we get from some of Kaladin's thoughts on the ideals of the Knights Radiant, and he drops a line which gives us some definitive evidence that Kaladin is indeed a Windrunner. Kaladin references him as a Windrunner, and he discusses. He's thinking about the oaths that he's given so far. He mentions how he knows he's said the first 2, still won't tell him the rest. He's trying to get Syl to tell him the rest, and Syl's like, nope, you got to figure those out, kind of thing, which I think is funny. But he references himself as a Windrunner. So I think there were some clues to that before, maybe, but this seems pretty clear and very helpful for us, I think, to know that Kaladin is indeed a Windrunner.
Going back to your end of the Wave Kings predictions, Paul, do you think Szeth is a Windrunner now that we have confirmed that Kaladin is a Windrunner?
I was thinking about this exactly like right whenever Eliot was saying that. It's still hard to tell. I want to say no. I really want to say no. I mean, just the evidence we have for him being a Windrunner is the Surge Binding, which obviously he has in common with Kaladin. But as far as these ideals of the Knights Radiant, that doesn't seem to be in line with Zeth's character and where he's going and everything. So I still want to say no, that Zeth is not a Windrunner. But I don't know what he is. I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm sticking with no.
So you're going with they're not in the same order. That's what you're going for right now.
Correct. They obviously have Surge Binding in common, but I believe that Zeth is a different order than Kaladin.
Elliot?
I think I'm going to stick with I think they are both Windrunners at this point. Just their abilities seem too similar, just with the lashings and the imbuing with Stormlight and all that kind of stuff seems to align. But I don't know. I may start to be leaning a little more towards you, Paul. Just with we've now learned that different orders of the Radiance share similar abilities, like the discussion we got from Yasna and Shallan. So that would be some good evidence there. I totally agree with you on the oaths. Like the oaths that Kaladin has spoken so far don't seem to really fit with Zeth's motives. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. That doesn't seem to describe Zeth in any way. So I kind of want to go in your direction and say they're different, but I don't know. I think I'm going to stick with I think they're both Windrunners. Their abilities just seem too similar to me.
Gotcha.
Sure.
All right. Any closing thoughts on episode 24?
I think Kaladin has a lot on his plate. He's got a lot to do. Dalinar's given him a lot of tasks. The assassin in white is on the way. Plus, we know that Sadeas and all the other high princes are going to be trying to take some people out as well. So Kaladin's got a pretty mammoth task in front of him. It'll be interesting to see how he handles it.
I think it's interesting that you say that because Shallan just got a lot removed off of her plate. If this betrothal goes through that she just had with Adolin, almost all of her problems are solved. She's now beginning to be a Radiant. Her family is saved. Like, she can soul cast on her own. Like, a lot of her problems were just solved.
Something I just thought of. This is, I guess, my closing thought. So I mentioned before that, off of Eliot's theory, that Shallan may use her Shard Blade out of a feeling of necessity. Either being forced to use it to defend herself or to defend someone else. And we talked about that being maybe Yasna or Adolin that are in danger. And we know the assassin in white is coming, so maybe that's the looming threat that could cause her to summon her Shard Blade. So we'll see about that. That's something I just thought of as a connection of when that could come into fruition. So I'm really excited to see a lot of the interactions. Once everyone's in the Shattered Plains, we've got the whole squad together. I can't even put my finger on what all is going to go down. So I'm hoping that happens. I have a feeling that something's going to happen, and it's not going to happen for a while. But hopefully, we start to see these characters come together soon.
We wondered back in the Way of Kings if we weren't going to in the future get an epic showdown between Kaladin and Zeth, when those two storylines collide. Now, I'm sure we're going to get down at some point, but now I'm starting to wonder, will it be Zeth and Kaladin, or will it be Zeth and Adolin? Will it be Zeth and Shallan? Like, there's more possibilities here now. This is intriguing.
Will it be Shallan and Kaladin? I'm just kidding.
Dueling champion. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Adolin's like the dueling champion, right? He could totally be fighting Zeth as best as he can, but Zeth is just too good, so maybe Shallan has to come in and he fights both of them.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Maybe.
I'm excited. I'm super excited, so the possibilities seem kind of endless at the moment.
I agree.
Alrighty, let's read on and reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Elliot and Paul.
Of course.
Until we meet again.